Hello, this is Isabelle. Hi, I hope you have a good evening. I'm trying to fix the light so that it looks good. I don't want to look like I'm in the middle of the road, with flashlight in front of my face. So let me know if you don't see me well, if there's a problem with the connection, because I'm trying to check, but I'm going to think also about my material. So just let me know. So today's session is for young professionals, people who want to find a job in Switzerland. So there's a few things I want to cover, but it's also an open session for you to ask me some questions. So I want to make this quite interactive by nature. So feel free to post your question. I will see them on screen and answer as they're coming. So the things I want to cover today, basically I want to give you a little bit of the context in Switzerland so that you understand how to position yourself. Then what I will do is tell you a little bit about the Swiss applications, so the do's and the don'ts. I know a lot of young professionals sometimes don't really know how to go about it. I will also share with you some resources, places where you can find more information. And then finally, what I want to do is also share with you my experience as an HR practitioner and what we're looking for in terms of candidates. So I see we have a few people online. Great. I hope you share this video with your friends, people looking for a job. Hi, Winnie. I'm good. Let me know if the light is not fixed correctly. I'm trying to be in the spotlight here. So basically, to get started, I want to give you a little bit of the Swiss context. So it's saying it's okay. All right. So great. So the Swiss context is, if you're right now, you just arrived in Switzerland, you don't really understand the context. It's quite important. It's basically how you set yourself up in that context. So for example, in Switzerland, there's many different cultures, different cantons. So you need to keep that in mind when you're looking for work, especially as a young graduate. You need to understand that there's different types of cultures, the Swiss German part, the French speaking part, etc., etc. That has a lot of importance. So I know a lot of companies now have more and more advertisement of their positions in English, but still the local culture is quite prevalent. I talk about that in a lot of my materials, the importance of culture, because it is the source, of the Swiss culture. I have someone talking in Italian, I believe. Ciao. So from the Swiss Italian part, not to be forgotten. So over there you need to speak obviously Italian. So you see this has the importance to be really taken into account in the culture. So understand the context. The other thing you need to understand is the fact that when you're looking for work in Switzerland, there was a votation. So some of you who are new maybe to Switzerland, there was a votation where it was decided to vote against massive immigration. So a lot of Swiss decided to vote against massive immigration, and the result of that is only going to be applied next year, beginning of next year, meaning that beginning of next year, companies will start applying in their own ways the consequences of that, and canton as well. So what you will find is that positions will be advertised with more and more things like locals only, or only people with valid work permits. So that's the way of applying this votation, because of course companies will also have to explain why they hire someone that's not already a person with a work permit. So this is something to keep in mind about what context you're going to evolve in. So first of all, the culture. Do you speak German? Do you speak Italian? Do you speak French? Because that will definitely change what type of positions you can apply for. Then the second thing is keeping in mind this votation, which is the political area there. Are you new to the Swiss market? Do you already have a permit? And if you don't have a permit, obviously the market is going to be a little bit smaller for you. So you will have to find an employer that wants to sponsor you. And that's actually going to be, I think, a little bit more challenging beginning of next year. So I just wanted to give this information to you so that you don't necessarily only look at it from your perspective, but also more the national perspective in Switzerland of what's going on and why maybe you're not getting called back, or you see that more and more jobs online have more and more restrictions, such as where you live and permit and all that stuff. So it was just to give you to paint the scene for you a little bit. So I'm just checking to see if there's any questions. Someone is, Sahil is saying everything is superb. Okay, great, perfect. So keep on going. So the first thing also I wanted to cover with you in terms of young professionals is something that is really dear to me, which is called orientation. So when I started my career, that was a little long time ago. When I started my career, I just basically picked a career based on what other people were doing, what I liked, but it was a little bit of a trial and error. And I'm very transparent about it on my biography in my online website, where I explain that basically it's a sort of trial and error that led me to where I am right now, where I'm really happy. But what I want to insist on is really the fact that orientation is going to help you a lot. So if right now you're thinking, what should I do? Which career path should I take? Really stopping for a minute and say, what type of orientation do I want? Because that's going to also help you have more credibility with the Swiss market. I see a lot of people sending their applications a little bit everywhere. Your credibility will come from knowing what you're looking for and having done your own checkup, so to say, on what should your orientation be. And that can also save you a lot of money. I'm always really sad to see people that, you know, have masters and PhDs, etc., etc. So it's always better to check your orientation. So I see a few questions here. Question coming: when I send an application for internship, trainee program, get the feedback that you are overqualified. I don't know how to cope with this problem. I think I made a video called, it's in my Monday motivation on that topic, you know, underqualified for something and overqualified for something else. It's part of positioning. It's really part of positioning. What is your best market? And of course, there's no ideal. Some people have all these master's degrees and all this experience. They can't find anything. And then people who are just starting out, they can't find anything. So that's where I really encourage people to look at what are some of the companies that might be interested in you that may not advertise. Because sometimes when you look at the typical, what I call the open market, it's only the jobs that only a few fit for, meaning you have the perfect education, you did the perfect internship. So maybe it's 1% of the population that fit all the, that cross all the dots basically. But the rest of everybody else, which is the non-typical profile, I call it, you never fit anywhere because you don't have this perfect profile that matches all the dots. So your best bet is to go an alternative way because you're an alternative type of person. So you need to find, you know, what are the companies that would be interested in me that never advertise maybe because they only recruit via their website. What are some of the people that I could contact that could get me into the field that I want to get in, meaning that you've prepared yourself and you know what you're doing. So it all goes back of what do you want? What's your big goal? And then work backward from that. What steps you need to take to get there? And I think most people, they have a goal, but they don't know how to get there. So they're going for the big goal, but then you're not equipped for it. It's a little bit like if I was saying, well, tomorrow I'm going to run the marathon. I have even no idea how to run, or I can't even do a mile at this stage. So of course I'm going to fail this goal. But if I say starting tomorrow I'm going to run for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, I can do that. Actually, that's what I'm doing right now, is little goals in terms of exercise. So when you have a big goal, which is to find a job in Switzerland, that's a huge goal, especially if you're outside of the country. The best way is to go backward and say, what steps do I need to take to get there? Well, first I need to have a right application. I need to identify which companies would be interested in me, really do research, work on my, you know, hidden market, etc. And then I would fit in the proper section, you know, but it's not going to be by answering a job online. Most of the great things you get in life are not easy to get. And usually if you think about the things you appreciated the most in your life right now, they were things you had to work for. So usually if you get something easy, probably you just think, yeah, it's okay, I can probably get better than this. That's why people get sometimes a little bit bored in their jobs, because it was something they got really easily. And I've been there. I had jobs that I had very easily. And then once I was there, I thought, yeah, nothing more, nothing extra. So again, if you've worked for something, you probably appreciate it. Okay, so I'm trying to see, Gabriella is asking, I see most people, especially from the Philippines, have work permits, but looking for jobs in Switzerland. So my question is, how do you get a work permit before you actually get a job? You can't, unless you get married to a Swiss national, and then of course you enter the country with a family, basically. It's the same principle in the US or, you know, countries like this. So either you get married to someone or you come as a family, or you do find a job. But, you know, now with the internet, you can find jobs even abroad. But it's just a question of which jobs are you looking for. If you come and you get paid under the market rate or under what typically people would pay you, I'm sure there's some people that are not very honest and are willing to offer really, really low salaries for people coming from abroad. Maybe even they work black market, who knows. But I think for the professional, I'm talking here professional jobs, you would have to have the right credentials and really apply for the proper market. And usually for people outside of the EU, it's typically the United Nations or the not-for-profit sector. I rarely hear of people getting hired in the private sector from abroad unless they're highly, highly skilled specialists, someone that, or maybe they followed a spouse and then they have the papers. So actually getting a job from abroad if you don't have a family member is probably going to be tough if you're not in that not-for-profit sector where they can hire worldwide. So I don't know if I answered the question, maybe a little bit long, my answer, but how do you get a work permit? Yeah, it's basically you need a job first. If you don't have a family member, you need a job first. So whether it's not-for-profit or start your own company, then it's a little bit of a different route because then you come as an entrepreneur and it's a different process, but you still need to do the process and you need to be approved, etc. But I think most people, usually when they ask me questions, they mean in terms of finding an employed job, not as an entrepreneur. So I hope I answered the question about coming from abroad, etc. Coming from abroad, I've made also a video on that. It is a challenge right now, especially going back to my context I explained earlier with the votation. The Swiss market has what they consider in some cantons a little bit higher unemployment rate. For example, Geneva is a little bit higher. So they want to take that down, the figures, so they will encourage employers to hire locals first. So it's all a question of priority, and Switzerland applies this whole principle of priority. So if I'm an employer and I get 10 resumes, 3 of the people are based locally and they have the right skill set, I will hire the locals and I will be encouraged to hire the locals. Otherwise, I will have to prove that there's nobody else on the market that can do the job. And for most people, you know, meaning most people that I get in touch with, that I work with, they're in the mainstream jobs, what I call, meaning, you know, admin assistants, executive jobs, manager jobs. There's quite a lot of professional roles in Switzerland. A lot of people work already in those fields. So you already have a big pool of people to pick from. So people have to be aware of that. You have a lot of talent already in Switzerland to pick from. And people that have been here many years, some of them have done their schooling. So they're prioritized. They have the favor. But it doesn't mean it's impossible. I'm going back to my earlier when I was talking about what is your goal. If you really want something, I believe you can get it. I know people who are not EU nationalities and they have great jobs right now, but they work through the process. It takes time. You know, it could be that you're going to do jobs that you may not want at the beginning, but you know, you have to work through the process and be willing to invest in yourself and invest in coming to Switzerland and understanding how it works. So it's an investment, it's time. I've done several expatriations. I went to the United States when I was young. I had to invest a lot of time and effort to have a career there. Then I moved to Paris. I had to relearn everything new because it was a different context. Then when I moved to Switzerland, again, different context. So it's possible. I'm the proof of it. You can have a real international career, but it's going to take effort. It's going to take time. It's going to take making some choices, which I find people are not necessarily willing to do. I was just reading an article before I got online about people having midlife crisis, etc. I find that basically, as Tim Robbins says, if you're not happy with your life, it means that you're not following your blueprint, meaning you're not really doing what you really, really want. So you have to be honest with yourself and say what it is that you want the most and be willing to make some choices. And sometimes the choices are difficult. It could mean leaving the family behind. It could mean leaving your country behind, your native place of birth. It could mean, you know, going abroad and having difficulties at the beginning, but you work through the hurdles and then at some point you see the reward. But the reward won't come until you make some choices and some investment of yourself. So again, I want to leave you with a positive note. If you're not in Switzerland, you're not an EU national, there are ways, but these ways will be a big investment on your terms if you really, really want this, if you really want to come to Switzerland, if you want to make a life. It is possible. A lot of people are proof of it everywhere. They came from abroad, but they put a lot of effort to make it happen. So that was the question from Gabriella. So moving smoothly forward, unless there's somebody else with a question. Just checking, okay. I think there was another question I didn't answer. I think I answered, okay. Oh, I see something else. Rosalind is asking, hi, I was just wondering 2 points. Will there be differentiation between people who have Swiss nationality and a C permit, and the Swiss, and then I can't read, and the Swiss who don't have a, I can't read the rest of it. But I think I understand the point of the question. If there's a differentiation between different levels of permits, I would say, knowing what I know, it does make a difference, because I think in the way of thinking of the culture, you want to provide for people who have invested also their time and effort. So of course there's priority for nationals, people who are born, so birth matters. And there's priority for people who have put in the time. So if you have a C permit, technically you're someone who's been around, you've put in your time, you've stayed there, you've paid your taxes, so you have almost a little bit of an easier way than someone who just came. So they do make a different differentiation, it's true, and it's not something that I can hide. I think it is a reality. Again, also it depends on the business that you're in. In high tech, for example, I would think they do put a lot of emphasis on talent and on people who have certain technical skills that they really, really, really want. So if you're a really innovative startup and you need very, very particular type of skills in engineering, I think you're going to prioritize that rather than the permit. However, if it's again a mainstream job, someone that, you know, let's say an assistant or just a regular manager, I think they will probably prioritize the national, the Swiss person, or the person with the C permit. So there's a big difference. But again, it's part of the process. So if you target to make a life in Switzerland, of course you start on a temporary permit, and then you get your B permit, and then you get your C permit. I know people who have gone through that, and now they're about to get their C permit, and they're very happy, and they feel like they deserved it also. They put in the time, they went to work every day, and they followed through. So I think it's also, there's this merit system of deserving to be in Switzerland, deserving to have a life there and stay there. So it's something that you have to keep in mind. There's definitely a differentiation, but in a way it's for people who've made the efforts and who sticked it through and really stayed there for a while. So it's the reality, but anyone can get there. You know, it's just a question of putting in the time. So that was Rosalind's question. Just trying to see if I missed something. Okay, question from Winnie. For young graduates, is it easier to get a job through networking or through normal job application? Okay, great question, Winnie. Thank you for asking, because that's something I spent a lot of time explaining. When you apply online, so I would say the normal job application, you're competing with everybody else. So you have a lot of young graduates that want to find this first internship or this first job. So they're going through the same channels as everybody else, meaning looking at websites, looking at job boards, which I will put some links for you because I still think it's valid to check them out, see if you fit. It's a first resource for you. However, the best bet is really, again, to go and find alternative ways and creative ways to find your internships. So I know I had a client, for example, she was quite creative and she created a really good blog where she was explaining a little bit about the vision that she had for her career and a technical area that she was really fond of. And she made a blog on that to really show people she was fascinated with the topic that she wanted to find a job in. So that's a very good example to differentiate yourself. You know, maybe starting a blog where you write about finance, something specific. I mean, there's lots, right now I'm just reading, there's so much on finance going on with the Bitcoins and all that if you're a finance person. In marketing, there's huge stuff going on as well with social media. So whatever field you're in, you can always find some type of a tangent or something that you really, really like and talk about it. And that's a way to differentiate yourself and to be seen by recruiters. So the best way right now is to actually be different. Going the normal way is not going to get you a job because you're competing with the masses. But if you're trying to make yourself a little bit different, so the way you apply is going to be different, you're going to be in the events where you can meet interesting people. So I'm talking about networking for people who are already in Switzerland, obviously. So if you have your degree from a Swiss school, you know, you can easily sign up for events in the evening. Now, if you're abroad, it's a little bit more of a challenge, as I was explaining now during this whole webinar, because of the context of limiting massive immigration. However, there's always ways where you can, what I tell people is come to Switzerland, you know, come to conferences, meet people. And it might not be an instant gratification where you meet someone on Monday and you get a job offer on Tuesday, but you're getting your network going also in Switzerland, and things do evolve, and you never know. Maybe you're not the proper person at that stage, but maybe in a couple of years, you're going to be the person that the company wants. So I think if you really want to work in Switzerland and you're abroad, you need to come as much as you can to Switzerland. If you're here already, sign up for as many events as you can. And again, going with being a young graduate, typically you have time. You're free to go out, you know, in the evening to mingle and get business cards and all that. So I think that's something that you really need to do. I think everyone needs to do more of that, because that's really, in my view, the best way to get known, you know, on the local market, to identify yourself and show what you can do, basically. Then the other thing I wanted to mention in this webinar, which I find interesting for young graduates, is the fact that if you're looking at studies that are done, and that's what I've done before this webinar, the biggest places where you have growth is not Europe. It's actually going on in Asia, it's going on in the Middle East, it's going on in South America. So if you're young and you have your career is ahead of you, I would say don't limit yourself to a specific region. And I have this talk with clients all the time where I say, you know, try to keep it open. And it's always a little bit of a struggle because people do have certain regions in mind. In my case, most of the time people want Switzerland, but don't be too hung up on the geographical region. I think what's most important when you're young is to get experience. So one way of looking at it, if you really want to work in Switzerland would be, for an example, if you're in finance, let me go to Singapore, where it's really huge right now in terms of growth. Let me go to Singapore, let me get some experience in a bank there, and then in a couple of years, I would be more than attractive for the Swiss market. So you see, it's better to go to Singapore, get experience there, come back with a bigger salary, rather than stay now around Switzerland where you're just waiting and not building anything for yourself. And then you fall into the category of individuals that have been unemployed for a while, which is something I always try to prevent. You know, this never helps to be unemployed, so anything is always better, including looking at other geographical regions. So just to give you a few figures in terms of the research that was done by a placement agency I won't name because I'm not advertising for them, but Japan plus 23% of growth, Taiwan plus 22%, Costa Rica 19%. What I found interesting, Hong Kong plus 17%. So you see that it's not happening in Switzerland in terms of growth. It's happening, that's the top, I have here the list of the top 10 countries, and Switzerland or France or UK, I would say European countries are not in this list. They come a little bit below. So I think what you want to keep in mind is, you know, if you're not finding something where you want at the moment, keep in mind also to broaden a little bit the spectrum, knowing that you can come back with more power a little bit later, and things change as well. So right now the growth rates in Europe in general is not amazing, but maybe in 2, 3 or 5 years it will be different. And then you can come back, ask for the salary that you want, be wanted because you have this international experience, and it's always better to get it when you're young. Then it gets harder when you start settling in, you know, you get a house or an apartment, etc., etc. So I would recommend, if you're right now free to go, you know, consider broaden your spectrum as much as you can. So that's for, again, the Swiss permits and the opportunities at large. Where are the opportunities right now? Opportunities are everywhere, but I think they're in the eyes of the person who knows how to find them. So if you really want a career, and I really insist on that, if you want a career, if you want to be a leader in your field, you need to expand, you need to challenge yourself. So if you go for the job that's the closest, which a lot of people have to do because sometimes there's family reasons, which I understand, but I also want to make it clear that it might not go in the way of job growth and opportunities. It may be that you're just maintaining a job for financial reasons, but the big career growth may be elsewhere. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking through your orientation, what you want to do, and what's the best bet for you at the moment. So that was a side note there, or a caveat, basically. So the next thing I want to talk about, unless I see other questions. I see another question, this time differentiation between a degree from, let's say, another country and from Switzerland. Well, it's the same as what I was saying before with the preferential treatment for the people from the culture. So, and it's actually more than just Switzerland, it's in the canton. So in other words, if I have a degree from the French part of Switzerland and I'm going to the German part, I'm not going to be favored. The person in Swiss German part is going to be favored. So it's really, really by canton. It's not even by the country itself. It's really localized in Switzerland. So they really, really give privilege to people that are the locals and that have graduated from the schools in the canton. So there's really this pride of the national preference and even the canton preference, which is really not the same in other countries. In other countries, it doesn't really matter where you graduate from. It's really, do you have the skills, etc., etc. But here it's really, they're looking at where you graduate. Sometimes they even pick students from the certain school that's based in that canton. So if you don't have that, unfortunately, and this company is really adamant about that, there's nothing you can do about it. But I know I've heard from HR people, and that's through the grapevine, that they do, in some companies, they do prefer people who have sometimes a similar degree as the person who's recruiting, for example. So it's just there. And I think to some extent, it's the same in the US. You know, you have a lot of people who hire only from Ivy League because they were Ivy League people themselves. So if you have a bunch of graduates from Harvard, they will favor people from Harvard. So I think to some extent, every country does it. I know in France, for example, same thing, the Ivy League school, there's a whole club of Ivy League people and they hire from each other. So I think it's almost, when you go to a different country, you're not going to be part of certain clubs. So you can only play within the companies that will have, I would say, you know, that will favor you or that will be interested in you. But it's not every company, obviously. It's just there. I think it's one of those things that you can't deny. It's just part of the culture. But, you know, it's not every company. Otherwise, no expat would ever find a job. So there are some predicaments and some situations where people do get a job if they fit and if the company is open to look at resumes from everywhere. And people from the UK do get jobs. So do people from the US. So there's potential there. But it's just to know that it takes longer and it's a lot of effort. So question, as an ex-HR practitioner, now turn more consultant, ex-HR in international organization, when you examine CV from graduates or for internships or jobs, what is the first thing you notice? What's absolutely no for Swiss CV? So that's a good question, going right through on the application. I think the first things that people will look at in your resume, and that's whether you apply for not-for-profit or from private sector, they will look at having the information that they want that's going to make the process faster. So as HR, I want to see immediately, do you have a work permit, yes or no? Are you based here, yes or no? Do you have the right skills? So skills should be on top. You know, your profile should be drafted in a way that I don't have to seek for the information. It should come to me. So that's communication there. It's how you draft your resume. I did a whole video on that I will post below, where I explain, you know, in detail the Swiss application. It's my my video, How to Look for Work in Switzerland, on YouTube. It gives you exactly what you need to put on your CV and cover letter. In general, of course, I can't make it customized to one person, which is what I do when I work individually with people. But at least it gives you some pointers of what to put on there. So definitely the personal details, the skills, the permit situation, are you available immediately? All those things should be easy for me to find. And your resume should be written in a way that's nice and easy to read. So when I see resumes that are 5-6 pages, and in not-for-profit, I used to get them because a lot of people have done research. So they're more, I would say, researchers, or you know, they did lectures, you know, some of them, or they did a bunch of things. So they want to throw up publications, and they threw everything on their resume a little bit randomly, and it's just very, very hard to read. So remember that a resume is a tool for communication. So you want to make it short and sweet. Again, people should get immediately the point. What are you looking for? Why should I consider you? Try to put yourself in the shoes of the person reading it. Is it clear why you're applying for this position? So that's my recommendation, is definitely make it clear, make it easy to read. Don't make the recruiter look for information. But again, that means you've already figured out what it is that you want, because a lot of people just send their resume as is. It's like, well, you recruiter, I let you think about what I could do for your company or organization. And it doesn't work like that. They don't have the time. So the whole skills assessment, potential assessment, orientation, that's not the job of the recruiter. The job of the recruiter is to fill a position. So the rest is for you to figure out. And then once you figure that out, you become a better candidate for a recruiter, because you already know where you want to be suited or where you want to fit. So it's going to be much, much easier for you and for the recruiter. So I find that when I was getting resumes, a lot of people were just sending through a document, you know, and it was up to me to figure out, what can I do with this thing, you know, and guess, you know, what I should do with it. And I don't have time. So, you know, if it's not clear to me, I probably don't know what to do with it. And managers that will look at it won't know what to do with it neither. So think about it as, make your communication clear on what it is that you're looking for. So I saw some other part of the question, what is absolutely no for Swiss CV? So that goes into my don'ts. What you don't want to do is send massively your application everywhere, because each employer will want to feel like you apply for their company, not for everybody the same. So think about that, making it tailored to the needs. And the other mistake I see is that people apply for every opening, thinking that if they apply for everything, at some point they will get something. But that's not the reality. The reality is that if you don't have what the employer wants, they probably won't be considering you. So each job is very different. So for example, when I was working in HR, I would have maybe an internship open, maybe a manager job open, and maybe I would say young professional open. So you realize that all these three are quite different. They require different skill set, different level of experience. And yet I had people who applied for all three, thinking that maybe they get one of them. So really understand yourself and where you're suited. Obviously, if you're beginning your career, don't even bother applying for senior jobs. You're just losing your credibility. It goes back to, you need to understand what you're good at and where you fit. So apply for the right level of a job. Don't apply too high and don't apply too low, because you're also losing credit if you apply too low. So it doesn't matter if it takes a little bit longer, but you want to get this right, because let's say if in the scenario that you get hired even within a wrong positioning, so someone hires you a little bit lower than you should, probably after a while you're like, yeah, I'm not learning anything, and you're not happy in your job. Same thing if you recruit yourself too high, or someone recruits you too high, then you don't feel at ease, or you feel like you're not qualified. So the best thing is to go. I'm always an advocate, and I share this quite often when I have the occasion. I'm an advocate of growing steadily. So that's how I built my career. I didn't start immediately on top. I wanted to learn through the different opportunities that I had and get experience before I move to the next step. And that's how you learn also, and you get better and better. So I find that that's why the proper positioning is good for you. It's going to also help you build up your career. So You need to start at the right level, learn from professionals who are more experienced than you, see what they do right, what they do wrong, and then you can also yourself position yourself higher. So really the question of knowing where you fit and having this self-awareness of what you're good at is important. So I hope that answers the question. Anita is asking a question. Hi, I'm just going to get a bit of water because my throat is getting a bit dry. Hi, when I have a degree as a primary school teacher, which I can't verify here in Switzerland. So you have a degree as a primary school teacher and almost 7 years of experience as sales manager. So your question is, what do you do with that, I guess? Because I can't see the rest of it. Well, I think your question, if I understand correctly, Anita, I think your question is really about what do you do with the skills that you currently have, which is something that most expats, that's their, I would say the mystery that they have to solve is that you have experiences from abroad, which can be quite different sometimes, especially if you've traveled in different countries. So you have all these experiences that have built up. And now you're at a stage where you think, okay, you know, what do I do with all this? How do I make sense of all this to find a job in Switzerland? So first of all, you need to find which part. It's a little bit, I think, what I was saying this morning. I'm not sure in the video, but you need to find which part you want to pursue based on what you see on the Swiss market. So if you see that in Switzerland, there's more needs where you're based for being a teacher, probably you want to invest the time in getting the equivalent or, you know, doing that certification part. If you see there's more needs for sales, then you don't have to bother about it and you just build up your CV to gear it more for sales. I would think just in general, there's always more jobs in sales, always more needs in sales. But if your heart is really with teaching, and I had a friend who just went through this stage where she really, really wanted teaching, that's what she preferred, and in the end she happened to have a job in teaching. So I think you have to follow what you like and go through the process. So if you decide you really want to do teaching, it's worth investigating what type of credentials, you know, you can find that out with the schools and they will give you the proper information on where to go to get, you know, the equivalent or what have you. That's a process. It seems like a lot because maybe you have to take some exams or go through paper finding. But in the end, if it's really what you want, it's worth it, you know, because then you'll get a job in something you like and, you know, learn the local language. And I think everything will come into shape. But it's really finding out based on what you see in the local market where you want to invest. You know, in all the jobs that you've done, you have to pick, you know, which is the specialization I want to pursue in Switzerland. Based on all the things that I can do, because most of us, there's lots of things that we can do based on our experiences, but in Switzerland you have to pick. You have to pick which ones you pursue and then build up your application in a certain format so that it reassures people that you're a good fit for that role. So unfortunately, the resumes that are a bit too wide, a little bit too general, they don't really do well because it doesn't make the recruiter feel secure you have a specialty. So it's harder to sell a resume of a generalist than a specialist. So the specialist is really the person that we know has done this work before and it's trusted. Whereas the generalist, like, yeah, they've done a bit of everything, but you know what it is that they know how to do very well. So when you come to Switzerland, it's one of those things I was saying earlier, when you have to choose your battles and follow through. It's one of those things as an expat that you have to pick it makes you pick your career almost, you know, whereas in other countries, maybe you could just fly by and do a little bit of everything here and there. Here, you have to get to the point where you say, okay, I have to specialize in something, at least the time when I'm here. So it takes a process and you have to go through paperwork and equivalence and all that stuff. But in the end, if you're going to get a job, it's worth it. And it's a minor, I would say, issue. But that's what I would recommend is pick the one you like the most. And decide, you know, go through the process to get recognized in this field so that you can get better credibility when you apply. So that was Anita. Then I have Winnie saying thank you. Great. Any other question I missed when I was talking? No, I think that's it for that. So on the Swiss application, I will post the link to my video where I explain a little bit, you know, what to do in the cover letter, what to do in the resume, so that you have something that's Swiss style. Because again, that's important to your application. I have thank you. Okay, thank you, Anita. So that's going to be important for your application, is to follow the process. So in Switzerland, it's very important. I think it's the same also in Germany from what I know, but it's very important to follow the process that people give you. And they're very clear on what they expect you to do. So in the application, they will say, we want your cover letter and your resume, or we only want your resume, or we want your full file, meaning that you have to send all your you know, recommendation letters, etc., etc. So make sure that when you read a job ad, you read it all the way until the end, and you understand what the recruiter wants you to do. Okay, I have a question here. I have bachelor's degree in commerce and working as an accountant. How I preparing my CV and what opportunity I got in Swiss market. I have 5 years of experience. While you fall in the non-EU type of category, so meaning, you know, what I was explaining earlier, you're not in that close circle of people that are already local. And just reading through as an accountant, you have so many accountants in Switzerland. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest fields in Switzerland, is accounting and finance, obviously. So I would say, unless you move here and you really start making a life here and want to maybe have a family, etc., maybe with a Swiss or something coming from abroad, it would be quite difficult to get a job in this particular sector, just because it's so crowded. Unless you had, I go back to what I was saying also earlier, you are in a very innovative field in finance, and you could be interesting for a startup, for example, where you could bring your knowledge. But if you're just doing pure accounting, when I say pure accounting, meaning you're just, you know, doing regular day-to-day accounting, the chance of you coming from such a faraway country when you have so many people in the Swiss market doing it is quite difficult. So I just be transparent on that. For those mainstream jobs, again, and you're not in EU, unless you work for the United Nations or you start your own business, those are really the only two ways. If you're not EU, it's United Nations or starting your own business. There's not many other ways. Or you marry a Swiss or someone here local. No one is going to bring you from China, from Australia, from, you know, Dubai or wherever, as an accountant or as a manager or as a marketing person. I mean, why? You have so many people here that are doing these fields. That said, you know, you could be someone that's extremely well networked in your country. You're part of the higher society and you have many family members in Switzerland or people you know from your networking experiences, then it's a different thing. And I won't even talk about that, because that's the, I would say, the jet set or the elite of the world here, where, you know, they never apply for a job anyway. They just know people in general. So again, I just want to be very clear. If you're outside of EU, your chances to get a job in Switzerland at this moment, especially with what I was explaining with the votation and the new laws, the new processes next year, are going to be very, very slim. So either you're already here in the local area of Switzerland, and then it's a different process. But coming from a faraway country with a mainstream type of job is going to be extremely, extremely difficult. So that's just the reality of it. So I hope I answered the question from Benny. I don't see anything else. Okay, so going back now more to the Swiss market. So if you're in Switzerland right now and you're watching this video, and I will put it also on my YouTube channel. So I want to give you a little bit of an idea. That was part of the goal I had in this webinar, of which companies hire young graduates or young professionals. So basically, if you're a young professional, I would really target the big multinationals, because that's where you can get some method. That's where you can learn some things. So you would learn, you know, how to work. Basically, you would learn from multinationals like, for example, P&G. If I take the example of a big one here in Geneva, in Zurich, they have a lot of multinationals as well, and they tend to recruit also English speakers. So if you're in Switzerland and you graduated, you're looking for a job, check multinationals, Check also medium-sized businesses. That's also a big part of the Swiss economy. So people tend to think, okay, when I'm an expat or I speak English, I should target multinationals, but that's only a small portion of the country. You also have medium-sized businesses that don't necessarily advertise as much. So everyone knows about the big names because they come up in magazines or on radio, television. But you also have the smaller businesses that can't advertise as much, but they also need resources. And I think the world is getting smaller, and now a lot of jobs are done also in English. So you could have a chance, you know, with a good command, of course, of one of the local languages. I would say that's a must anyways. But at least if you're not a Swiss native, you'd still have a chance to get in if you find a job that's suitable. So look at small startups that may need someone as an intern. I know also people who did that. Look at smaller companies and see if they'd be interested. But they won't advertise in job boards. So you need to also look at their websites. So I have a list here of companies in Switzerland. They tend to be bigger size companies. So I'll be happy, just put interested in the comments, and I'll send you the list here of organizations in Geneva, and also a listing of where to look for organizations. So you can target and see, okay, what kind of market am I dealing with? What's out there? You know, where could I apply? Because again, these organizations are not going to advertise necessarily in the job boards. They just go with their local network, or people who are interested in their work will follow them. So for example, if I'm a big marketing person, I just love marketing and I'm really a fan of what, I always use the example of, you have, let's say L'Oreal, for example. You love marketing in beauty and you follow L'Oreal. So you just go to their website and you see regularly what type of positions they recruit. So that gives you a better idea, in my view, than just looking at job boards. It's going by your interests and what companies are active in your interests. So if you're big in marketing, what companies demonstrate that in Switzerland that you'd love to work for them? Same thing with finance. You know, you have the big accounting firms that a lot of people want to work with. So that's how you get started, is by identifying which companies are out there in the market. So more knowledge of the market, which I find most people don't necessarily search for the right organizations, or they limit themselves to the job boards. Job boards is only a portion of what's available, but you need to also do more of a search on what's out there. So that's what I would do, is look at, you know, which market, which organizations are out there. How do you find, you know, these positions that may only be advertised in the website? And I had the case when I was working in not-for-profit where at the beginning we only advertised on the website because we didn't have the resources to pay for advertising on the job board. So typically we only got applications from people who knew what we were doing. It was in health, in not-for-profit, and the specialists working in the health field knew about us. So they applied via the website. They just knew through the grapevine that, you know, we exist and we have job offers, and people just came to our website. So you just need to build this understanding of who are the actors in the field that you're targeting and just apply directly there. That's how people look in Switzerland. Usually it's by, you know, which fields people are active in and their network. Those are the two main ones. I just saw a question going through. I have applied to more than 100 jobs. That's a question. Had 7 interviews in 2 years. I have a BA and MA from the UK. Feel so down sometimes as I was so close. Well, that's something I hear a lot, as the market is tight and a lot of competition with many interviews. I mean, I imagine from reading your question, it's not 7 interviews with the same company. It's maybe 7 interviews with different companies. But yeah, it's a long process, especially if the job you're talking about was an online job. You were competing with several hundreds of people, so it's going to be several interviews, and then maybe you make it to the end or not. That's why I say job boards, even if you do get picked, you're in competition. So that's why going the back door, you know, via the network, via searching for companies online and applying a little bit in the background, will probably bring you a little bit more results than just applying straight to what you see online, because you're competing with everybody else. So it's more research and more work in a way to identify those hidden opportunities because they're not visible. So you have to be very witty on how to find them, but there won't be any competition or very little competition. Whereas if you apply on a job board, it's very easy. You just plug into Job Up or Jobs or what have you. You see the job ad, you apply, so does everybody else. And then you end up going through this, 3 interviews, not getting anywhere. And then it's just time goes by. So when I work with individuals, I really advise in the job search not to focus only on job boards, even though it's the easy way and people should still do it because it has some relevance and people do get jobs via job boards, otherwise they wouldn't exist anymore. But it should be one of the tools that you use, but only one of the tools. So probably if you look at what percentage of time you spend on them, probably 30%, I would say, and then the rest of the time should be doing other activities that will bring you hidden opportunities. So really it's different than the way we used to look for work in the past. When I was looking for a job in the 90s, it was 100% job boards, and I always found a job, and there were, I think, a little bit more jobs also at the time. That's my view. So it was just easier. But I think now with the competition and people are getting more global and you're competing globally with everybody else, I think it's just too much of a hassle. It's just too competitive, and what you get for what the time you put in is just not very good in terms of ratio. If you think about all the hours you spend drafting the letters and the returns you get, it's just very low. So that's why really developing skills to go to the hidden market and find out, other alternative opportunities that will lead you to what you want to do eventually is a much better idea. And one example I gave earlier, maybe the example is not the ideal because it includes going to another country, but it's one example. I had a friend who was looking for a long time in Geneva, and he said, you know what, it's just worthless. I think he was looking for 2 years everywhere in Switzerland. And he said, it's not worth it. I'm going to China. And he had a job in 5 minutes. And a very good job, a senior job, very well paid, etc., etc. So I'm just saying, sometimes making big decisions to basically break this bad circle of going around and not getting anything. That's just one example. I mean, obviously, sometimes when I work individually with people, I just see based on their situation what makes sense. Of course, if you're married and you have children, you can say, I'm going to China, goodbye. So that's just one example. There's other ways. You have to find creativity around it of how do you find solutions to your being stuck problem, which is what it is. When people are looking for work and they go through the same things and they don't get the job, and they look and they don't get the job, at some point, you need to find solutions, and they're very individual. Based on your situation, what is a good solution for you may not be a good solution for somebody else. So I hope I answered that question. So someone is saying I use LinkedIn a lot, and most interviews were through it. Yes, I know someone who just told me a couple of days ago that by going through who went and saw her profile, she was able to connect with recruiters and get interviews that way. So don't hesitate if you see recruiters that went and checked out your profile to contact them and ask them questions, see what was interesting, what caught their attention so that they can get in touch with you. So I met people who worked in the particular companies but still didn't help. And then I can't read the rest. Yeah, I think I can't read the rest, but I assume, again, it's assuming because I don't see your whole profile, I just see a few lines there, that for whatever reason you need to stay where you are, because again, my first and easiest solution to being stuck is to go and look somewhere else. So I find that especially if you have the expat type of profile, you're used to moving to wherever the opportunities are. So if you're not, most people that contact me, or if you ask this question, I assume there's a reason why you need to look where you are, because maybe you're with a partner or children or what have you, or maybe you just have a particular interest of where you are. So if you have to stay, then it's going to be, of course, longer, because you're limiting yourself geographically in a area where most people are also looking. So again, as I was saying, it's very competitive right now. And the reason why I put the context at the beginning of the video is to explain that, you know, there's definitely local preference needed based on the law that was passed, or the votation that was passed. So it's not your fault, it's just something that you have to keep in mind. So it makes things, for sure, for expats or for foreigners, it makes things more complicated, because it means, you know, harder time to get a permit and harder time to be selected. So so again, it's all a question of faith. It's if you really want something, you know, and you're willing to do what it takes, even if the environment is not ideal, which is the case, then it will take longer time. You know, people really want to find a job and they really are committed to their efforts. At some point, you know, they will get something, but it will take longer. So I know people who do find positions, but their search is going to be a year, 2 years to get the job that they want and in the company that they like. So, you know, it's just the reality of it. So either you say, okay, I have an interest in staying where I am. It's my priority right now. So I will be willing to review, you know, the different things I can do to find a job. Or, you know, I'm opening myself broadly, you know, looking at different countries. And again, most people that I found that were finding good opportunities were the people that looked a little bit broader. So when I was working with professionals, the ones that found good jobs were looking a little bit more broadly. So they said, okay, at one point they said, forget it, I'm looking a little bit more broader. And they found countries that were willing to hire them, or other geographical areas. But if you're tied to one area, right now in 2017, it's more difficult, especially if you don't have the background in that country and the experience. You know, it's just more effort, way more efforts and way more time. So it's just something to keep in mind. So I hope I answered the question. I don't see anything else. So moving straight along, I think going back to a question I received about networking. So I have a question from Carrie. What are the best ways to find jobs in hidden markets? So what I was explaining a little bit earlier about targeting companies. So it's really footwork, looking at all the companies in the search engines that I will put in the comments. So looking at those search engines and being able to pull every single company, check their website. So it's like you have to do research. You check their website, you see if they have any vacancies that may not be posted online. See if you could fit this vacancy. You know, do you speak the languages required? That's one way. So tap into the research part. The other way is to go to as many events as you can if you're local. So you should be registered to everything that's out there where you could meet people. I will also post some links. I wrote a blog on where are the best places to network. So, so it's really to be active, to be out there. Basically, you have to expose yourself. So if you're staying at home just entering job ads, you're not going to get a lot of difference in your job search. But if you start really putting the energy to going out there and showing that you really want to be part of the community, you want to be involved. Some people are also offering their services for free to organizations that they like and they target. And this way gives them a network to start from. So that's something, if you're a young professional, you can consider. I think if you're not a young professional, you have to be careful so it doesn't look like you're desperate and you're willing to work for free. But definitely if you're starting your career, it's not surprising, you know, that you want to do a couple of internships, maybe work for free with targeted organizations where you learn some things. And that way you get more opportunities as well to meet other people. So I know individuals, a lot of individuals found jobs this way by offering their services for free and doing an internship for free. And then through that, they had a network to work with and met people and were able to get another type of job. So something to weigh out in your job search strategy. So what you're asking here is really job search strategy. It's really I would say my specialty, and what I do with candidates, with people who are working with me, is really find for their particular profile, because again, I think it's a different strategy for everybody. If you're young, it's not the same as if you're 40 or 50. If you have a career change, it's not the same. So when I see the questions roll right now, I don't look at your profile to see all the details about you. So I'm trying to give general answers. But when I work individually with people, I take into account their particular profile. So who are they? and what's best for them. So what's good for one individual may not be ideal. The example of free internships, I think if you're 40 and you're asking for a free internship, you may look like you're really desperate because, you know, again, it's internships and working for free is more when you're starting out your career. I would have a hard time also as an employer to hire someone that's already senior and give them a free internship. I would feel like I'm using their skill set. So it's not the ideal strategy if you're a little bit more senior is what I'm saying. So the job search strategy is really based on your background, what you want to achieve, where you live. You know, it's not the same strategy if you live in the center of Geneva than if you live somewhere very remote in Switzerland where there's not many companies there, not many events to attend. So it's very individual is what I mean. So the general thing again is to look outside of the job boards and to try to be out as much as you can, because the way people get jobs in Switzerland is by meeting individuals, by meeting and greeting. I know I had one client, we barely started the first session. I remember he already had a potential opportunity because he had met someone via his children. So by just going to school and meeting with the parents, and the parent happened to say, yeah, I'm looking for someone who can develop my business, and that's it. So, but he was very commercial in the sense that he could speak, he could go towards people and show what he could do. So probably a skill you want to develop is really how to present yourself when you go outside and make people come to you and want to know more about you. So it's all about, you know, being more commercial type of thing, being more open also to meet individuals. So that's part of developing the hidden market for me. So I think that answered the question from Carrie on how to find jobs in the hidden market, or at least give you some pointers, because that could be a whole lecture, and the lecture wouldn't be entirely suited for you in particular. But I give again general trends in the webinars here I'm doing on Facebook Live. So any other question before I move? I'm just checking. Oh, we're already almost an hour. Time flies. I just tried to think if there was something I wanted to share with you. So I just want to, maybe I'll keep checking the screen, but give you some don'ts, because I think when I was talking to someone a little bit earlier, she told me, you know, what are some of the no's, the definite no's on an application? Tell us as an HR expert. So definitely a no is to send an application when you don't meet the minimum requirements. So the minimum requirements is something when you look at the ad that will say minimum requirements or required or must or whatever way they write it. And then usually you have desirable. So if you don't have the desirable skills, I think it's still okay to apply. Because again, that's desirable, but it's not ideal. If you don't have the required skills, meaning if they say you must, it's a must, you must have 4 years of experience, or you must have an accounting degree or whatever, then if you apply, probably you won't get selected and you just wasted your time and their time. So unfortunately, when it's a must, you have to follow through. It's nothing that you can do about it. So it just eliminates candidates. The second not to do, or things to avoid, is to spend too much time online and not networking enough. So I think I said that a lot already in this webinar, so I don't want to repeat myself. But definitely nowadays, you know, with the open market and the job boards, you don't see really what's going on in the market. So spending too much time there, I would say more than 30% of your time, is not going to give you tremendous results in terms of job. The other thing to avoid is no preparation before networking or interview. So definitely before you go out to network or before you have an interview, you want to think about what you want to say during this particular event or interview. So think about who you are, think about what you want to do with your career. When you go to an interview, check the company, check what their needs are, what type of people they need to work for them, and what kind of skills they're looking for. So you definitely want to work more on finding out what it is that you can bring. So one word I like to use is value, what value you're bringing. This is definitely in 2017 something that companies will be looking for, is the value. So we really now, everything is down to making money and having a business where you grow. That's what most companies want. So when they're looking at recruits, they need to find people that will bring them the value that they need so that they can grow and basically have more business. So think about in terms of really business, like what can you bring to this company where you would be worth for them to pay you, basically to offer you a job. So it's not so much about, yeah, I went to school, I have a degree, yeah, this is great for you, but then think more a little bit further about what have you learned that you could, for example, put into place inside the company or help the company with. So that's really the preparation, I call that. Other thing to avoid is to have a poor job search strategy, meaning that you're not keeping track of your application, you're not following up, you're not looking elsewhere than the actual job boards, or you're not extending yourself as much as you should. So really not putting enough effort. I cannot insist on that as much. You will only get the results based on the efforts that you put in. So, but again, the efforts have to be targeted. So when people say they send tons of application, if it's just done massively, it's not going to bring you a lot of results. It has to be targeted to the right organizations. And the last one is something that I want to mention because I've seen it also with individuals, is piling up degrees for the sake of it. So I'm all for education. I really believe in education. I believe in getting a degree if it's the right degree for you based on what you want to do. So when people say, I have a triple master's and a quadruple PhD, I think it's great for you as an individual because it must be fun to do a lot of studies, and I love studying anyway, and I love learning. But you have to think in terms of your career project, if that really serves you. So just going for the next new thing that's advertised is not necessarily going to help you if it's not part of your job that you're doing. So if you look at most jobs in Switzerland, only require simple, and I was just looking again this afternoon, I'm looking at the market every day, and every day I get the same, I note the same result, which is most jobs don't even require education past a high school degree. I mean, it's all about technical skills. You need to know how to do something very well, but it's nothing really major where you have to do tons of research and things like that. So then you have specialties like IT or finance, and then they're looking for specialists. But I think in terms of the mainstream jobs, they only want people that have the know-how. So maybe they've done a special certificate, which is really recognized in Switzerland, the technical training or the continuing education. So they really appreciate people who have a specialty and who know how to use this specialty. I see a lot of people want people who have assisting, they know how to assist. Doesn't mean they have a master's in business administration, but they just know how to assist. So if you're someone who's worked with a bunch of different companies in Switzerland and you always assisted, let's say, directors, and you just know how to assist a director, but you don't really have a lot of high degrees, it's okay. You will still find a job because you know how to do your job and you've done it before for others. So really the value in Switzerland is really about knowing how to do your job and knowing how to be resourceful for a company. So they don't really put so much emphasis on high degree unless you work for big multinationals or, organizations that really value those kinds of things. But in terms of the mainstream market, what they're looking for is people who know how to work, how to have a specialty and work it through. So think about that. Think about your specialty or what you want to focus on if you want to grow a career in Switzerland, because that's what's going to be your value to that company in the future. So that would be my 2 cents. Just trying to see any more questions. So yeah, I think in this webinar, we talked a lot about the hidden market. That's really going to be something that helps you in the long run, more than answering on ads on job boards. Really, you need to develop your knowledge on the market as well, what kind of companies are here and what skills they're looking for. And you may find by doing this research that you need to change maybe your orientation a little bit. So definitely the jobs in the future are going to be in healthcare. They're going to be in IT and digital. So if it's not really your cup of tea, you need to see broadly what it is that you like the most, but jobs are going to be in IT. In marketing now, all the jobs I find are in digital. So I don't see a lot of other kinds of marketing jobs. So if you did marketing for many years and you don't have the digital type of skills, you won't be as interesting. So if you're a young professional, you want to look at these trends so that you can say, okay, how can I fit in those trends, and what kind of additional education do I need to be credible at this stage or to grow my career? So again, I will share a lot of links so that you have more resources to tap into and more information you can look on the Swiss market, so that you can say, okay, now I can pinpoint a little bit more what I'm lacking, and take it from there. But it's going to be a process. If you're not working yet, or you don't have experience, I have clients who find jobs, but they're because they've invested a lot of energy and they really don't let go. You know, it's really, you have to say, okay, it's an everyday effort, and you really, really, really have to want it. I have 2 people right now. They both found part-time jobs, but it's because they really, really wanted it and they really push for it. So it's possible. You just have to see yourself as, I call it in my ebook, I'm my own project manager. You have to become your own project manager, and look at it as it's your project is to find a job. So I hope this last phrase will give you some optimistic view, I guess, on the fact that you can find something. If you put the energy and the effort and the knowledge, more technical know-how on the job search part, and then you get more results from it. So I'm just checking if there's a last question before I go for tonight, as it's getting late for everybody. Also, please put in the comments if you like this time, or if you would prefer a little bit earlier. I'm just testing in terms of time. I know 7:30 might be a bit late, so maybe you prefer something earlier. I was thinking maybe 7, but just let me know which time really you prefer, so that when I do these webinars every month, the time suits most people. So that would be also appreciated. And if I find a question that I didn't see online, I will go through a little bit later so that I can answer the questions that I didn't get to answer on the webinar. So with this said, have a great evening. Let's keep in touch, and I will post the links tonight so that you can review. I will also share this video in my other social media. Feel free to share also within your networks if you believe it's going to help someone you know. The idea is to share the webinar and help other people who are in the same situation and find solutions for them as well. Okay, so I wish you a very good evening. Thank you for your questions that were quite good questions actually. And we stay in touch for the next webinar. I'm going to be in Zurich on Saturday. So if you're in Zurich, you're interested in entrepreneurship, I'm going to be at the Swiss Expo. So you're welcome to check it out. I will post the link a little bit later in the week. My YouTube channel is called Isabelle Litzler. So I will also post that out there so that you can follow my Monday motivation. But I usually share everything everywhere so that no one misses anything. So thank you, Winnie. Thank you, everybody. I will talk to you soon. Bye.